Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies, and we're going to continue to do our Gnostic Runology series here with the 11th class. We're going to do an overview or a summary of what we've looked at, and then just do a little quick introduction from one of our favorite authors, Huiracocha, and then next week we'll be jumping into each individual rune. So, or next class, hopefully it'll be next Sunday. As usual, before we get into today's material, we're going to do a quick review of the previous class. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments area. All right. So, we've been trying to review our Germanic authors that kind of popularized this mystical aspect of Runology. We went through Marby and Gorsleben. I think we went through somebody else. Perit Shu. And then last week we did Teltscher. So he had this idea that there's a different type of energy besides just, or main type of energy, maybe we should say, besides just gravity and light. And he said that there was streams of subtle energy, is what he called it. And he said that that they had some aspects that he submitted for our review. We can assume that these energies are free energies. They can be active without being blocked in any way. The planets, the stars, and the sun send them towards the earth, and that they have the role of basic energies that provide formation. So they form or crystallize or condense things through their energies. It's an interesting idea after having studied the astrology course. It definitely could fit with that. But at this point, right, I'm not sure that we have sufficient evidence to prove it, but it's a nice idea that fits with esotericism. So these runes, he says, are compounds of subtle energy. They are like a symbol showing the shape or the type of energy and the way that it works. So almost all the runes have a line. He divided them up into 3 different types, right? Full-length lines. Runes that have a full-length line. That have only full-length lines. So this one, this one, this one, this one. And then runes that have full-length line and half lines, which is most of the rest of them. And then runes which consist only of half lines. Sig is the only one I can see here, the Sig Sag Sol Sul rune. So then as an example, he says, for the first set, which are only full-length lines, we have the Is rune, which is one stream of subtle energy because it's only got one line. The E rune is a harmonic connection of 2 streams of subtle energy, and the Hagal rune is a connection of 3 streams of subtle energy, which he says there's no more than 3 that can connect. B, which is runes that have half lines, he says that they are auxiliary lines of power or energy, which are related to the primary line, the main line. So that's his idea. Runic symbols are images of the connection between and combination of subtle energies. So that's what they're talking about. How subtle energies combine together. And he repeats the same idea that Guido von List had. Hold on. That Guido von List had, which is that in the Edda, there's a passage which has Wotan's rune song, and that those are associated with certain runes, and so we can extract information about that. For example, the East rune in this system is a 9th rune. So he says each rune mentioned here has a means to cause or force a specific state within ourselves or around us. Each rune has a means to cause or force a specific state within ourselves or around us. So either to ourselves or to the situation around us. And then he references the rune song, which talks about interacting with human beings and how to kind of how the runes help us with that. So he had this idea, the subtle streams of energy. And so he called them the murmuring runes, the runes that murmur things to us. That if we kind of pay attention, we can get the type of energy, the stream of energy that's being crystallized through them. But he said, just as there's good, life-giving, but we also know that there's poisonous or harmful to life subtle energies, and so we need to be aware of that not everything, it's not all good, right? It could be, there's yin and yang, there's good and bad in everything, and so we want to become aware of that so that we know how to make ourselves healthy and take advantage of them. And he even says that we should not neglect exercise, sports, massage, deep breathing, runic postures, and also but this will help us strengthen the subtle streams, the streams of subtle energy in our body, and also through joy, goodness, and love. He says the main effect of the runes lies in the fact that they are spiritual means to cleanse and to nourish, i.e., that they have an effect of spiritual cleansing and nourishment. And then there's a table at the end of the handout also that talks about his German word and the kind of possible translations for it so that you can understand how he made associations. He didn't give any for this rune. And then we looked at the preliminary rune exercises. The East rune exercises. We looked at Marby's concept of it. He says that we can extract certain energies from different regions. And he said this position can be done seated, standing, or walking. The main idea is to be prepared psychologically to say or have the only thought, I am here. But the simplest way to do this exercise is just to realize that we are an antenna, or we serve as an antenna, for energies that enter in from the cosmos. In Telcher's terminology, subtle streams of energy. that come in from the planets and the stars, and according to Marby, from the Lodge of World Space, or like a bigger thing that's even beyond stars and planets, like a bigger level or energy or dimension or whatever. And that anyway, those energies come down into us. And so by pausing, preparing ourselves and doing the practice or the exercise of remembering that we are an antenna, this can really help us to be conscious of those energies that are flowing through us. They flow in through the head, out through and possibly the arms and the legs based on our body position, and then out into the earth. So we end up serving as a sort of intermediary thing between heaven and earth. He gave some breathing exercises. He talked about pronouncing with different tones, the vowel associated with it, in this case I or E sound, and that through doing this, the whole body is an antenna or a magnetic conductor of currents from all 5 zones. Remember, he talked about different zones of world space, saying that there's zones above, right, the planets, the stars, the atmosphere, and of course the whole universe or cosmos, as well as the surface of the earth, and then the interior of the earth. So 5 different zones. Coomer, a couple years later, gave some other exercises. 2 years later, gave some other exercises. He says we need to learn to command the body. And so we give it commands. The way we start is we stand in the same position, which is basic military, European military position, heels together, feet splayed out, 60 degrees. Chin tucked, chest out, so that means shoulders back a little bit. And then you say to yourself, I am your supervisor, talking to the body. I am your supervisor. You have to obey me fully and completely. All muscle twitches are eliminated starting today. You have to submit to me. Now, I want you to stand at attention before your superior, yourself, or your inner being. And then the student pictures themselves as a member of divine humanity. And we just concentrate on that picture and do a visualization for 5 to 10 minutes. 10 to 20 minutes. Above all, he says, the student must gain calm, peace, patience, and perseverance, which is absolutely necessary in order to penetrate into the rune mysteries. In this position, we can tune ourselves in to certain universal waves, similar to currents or streams, but he calls them waves, like an antenna of nature, through which one incorporates waves of subtle force into oneself, according to the practitioner's fundamental vibration. He has an affirmation also that we can do, breathing exercises and an affirmation. The affirmation is, myself is awake. Or you could also say, I'm awakening, or my inner being is awakening me. I am a child of humanity. I serve it through higher development and thereby acquire magical abilities. I consciously walk the path towards you, All-Father. Therefore, I always have your protection and your blessing. I love my brothers and sisters and am kind to all people. I will defeat the weakness in me, thus creating a better, healthier life for myself. I want to become wise and noble. With all my force, I openly fight all the corruption, vulgarity, inferiority, and evil which hinders my spiritual development. I live in harmony and send out only noble good thoughts. Thus, through thee, All-Father, I will arrive at the luminous goal. It's a nice little affirmation, especially if we tweak it out with the Gnostic phraseology. And he recommends doing it for about 7 days. All right, well, that's the review we wanted to do today. Before we jump into today's material. Let's see here. All right. So today we're just going to summarize what we've studied up to this point, if that's possible, but just try to so we can get a grip on it so that we can understand what we're going to be doing next. So first part is the summary or the overview. We've tried to introduce the reader to different factors that have played a role in the development of the runic exercises. We have briefly looked at the Gnostic anthropological aspect, then the mythological, as well as the historical background and context that contributed to the popularity of the runes. However, our real aim is to study and understand the Gnostic esoteric aspect of these practices. As we mentioned at the beginning of the course, our goal has been to prepare the reader for the teachings of Arnoldo Krumheller, Huiracocha, and Samaelo and Veor. Why? Because of the following statement from the Christmas message 1968-1969. Well, actually, it's from a book called Tarot and Kabbalah. He says, the Christmas message 1968-1969 contains the runes for awakening the consciousness. So what this implies is that runic exercises can be used to help us, to assist us with the awakening of the consciousness. And that's obviously something that we need to test, experiment with, and verify for ourselves. But obviously we wouldn't be doing this class if we didn't think that there was something of value in these exercises. It becomes clear when studying Samaelo and Veor's writings on the runes that he studied Huiracocha's runic course. He's even quoted as saying that Huiracocha's course on magic runes is marvelous. There's no denying it. So we can study that now. It's available in English. It was a private class, but you know, with the internet, things end up getting leaked sometimes. So we have a copy. Thanks to an English translation. When we study Huiracocha, it becomes clear that he studied the German esoteric and occult authors of his time, including Kummer, Kurtzahn, and Perit Shu. And he seems to also have been friends with Perit Shu and Kurtzahn. And if we read those German authors, then we can see that they read and or were influenced by some other German authors, Gorsleben, Marby, Guido von List, and Fischbach. So we've included them all in an effort to show the possible sources, inspiration, or at the very least, similarities between the authors. Here we have a graphic showing you the German-speaking authors. Huiracocha spoke both German and Spanish, and Samaelo and Veor spoke Spanish. We don't know actually if he spoke other languages, but he wrote in Spanish. And so you can see sort of the connection between all of them is Huiracocha. So he's an interesting fellow, and he is a pretty spectacular occultist. His books are very helpful. So that's why we want to study him as well. The influence of Guido von List on the 20th century runic studies cannot be underestimated. Although Johannes Burris used a slightly modified version of the younger Futhark runic alphabets, combining several other variants in the 1600s, to which Guido von List added a few more, it is clear that List's alphabet became the popular one among those interested in Völkisch studies. Here you got a little table that shows Berus 1600s, Fischbach, remember we said he clearly influenced Guido von List, and then Guido von List's rune shapes from his 1906-1907 book, The Mystery or Secret of the Runes. It's sometimes said that Guido von List created a new alphabet of 18 runes, often called the Armanen runes. However, both Berus and Fischbach also emphasized the same first 15 runes, calling the remaining ones more recent runes. So what List attempted to do was to reduce all the different rune alphabets into the most important ones. So let's see if it'll fit on there. Close. Almost all the rune authors we're studying agree on the first 15. List added 3 more, and many rune authors inspired by him have adopted these 18 runes as the primary one. However, in our studies, we're going to look at some additional runes and variants of these primary 18 ones. We're going to actually work with 22 runes. So below we have a list of the table. We have a table listing the runes on the left, and along the top the names of the authors we're studying who mentioned them explicitly as runes. So this is obviously going to be a lot easier to view as a piece of paper. Fits on a piece of paper. That's a handout at the bottom of this, but we've got all our different authors here. We didn't put Huiracocha on here because these are his runes. Maybe not all the shapes, but the 22. So it's just kind of like a comparison, looking at them. Again, we refer you to that handout. It's at the bottom of the page. Next, we want to move on to these rune songs and mnemonics for studying or remembering the runes. As we've learned when we studied the mythological aspect, singing rune songs or the chanting of rune poetry, enchanting, plays a role in the folklore of the runes. After Odin had hung 9 nights on the world tree, he learned rune songs or runic incantations before he came down. So this idea of rune songs or runic incantations, magical songs, enchanting songs, poems, is connected with the religious form. Fischbach explains that runes were not magic formula in and of themselves because they became magical only through incantations or magic sayings. What does that mean? It means that the runes and the songs go together. They can't be separated if we're looking for the magical aspect of them to be activated. He also said that in order to perform their healing functions, these sayings were invoked through a healing song. Remember, it could also be a salvation song. At this point, we should understand the limitations when trying to translate certain German words into English, right? We talked about this before. The meaning of this Heil word could be hail, health, well-being, salvation. So Fischbach says that these songs were closely connected through alliteration with the runes, which is the use of similar phonetic sounds at the beginning of adjoining words. It was very important that the rune conformed to the incantation or magic saying. And Fischbach tells us the rhyme repeated the initial sound to make the saying more powerful. He gives an example with divination. When the answer was given, it was in rhyme. The seer rhymed the alliterated runes. So what does that mean? Let's understand an alliterative rhyme. In English, we've got Peter Piper. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where's the peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked? So that one is, not necessarily esoteric, but if we were to have some words or phrases that went together, one after another, related to a certain rune, that was sort of like a little poem or a little rhyme, that could help us remember them. But then what if the meaning was also deep? So that's one aspect. The other aspect, or another aspect that we want to look at, is the runic body posture. So this is really why we're studying this, because the runic body postures are, in short, magical. They're wonderful, and they have an effect, and they're a practical tool we can use. So that's why we're studying this, to see the sort of progression from the runes as something magical, or historically mystical, and then into what are the people interpreting them as in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then now they're becoming body postures, and there's mantras that goes along with them, which they're calling songs. So that's what we're getting to. Fischbach's alliteration concept seems to have been picked up by Guido von List, because the building blocks of Liszt's Kala mystery language are found in these 5 vowels combined with consonants. We covered this when we talked about Guido von List's runic ideas, but we're going to try and summarize it here. The Kala, or what Liszt sometimes called Aryan primordial language, is based on phonetic values as opposed to numeric values, because the Kabbalah uses numeric values, so it's based on phonetic values, sound, where the runes correspond to a combination of vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, U, and or consonant sounds. These sounds are combined together to make syllables or sound formulas, which Liszt says have an esoteric significance. These combinations form what Liszt calls seed words. For example, for the first rune, the Fa rune, the F rune, the seed words are Fa, Fe, Fi, Fo, Fu, or he said they could be combined Af, F, If, Of, Uf. So the vowel can be before or after. And he actually dedicated his last book, which was like the primordial Aryan language, blah, 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 to talking about each one of these syllables and what they imply or their significance. And in fact, the seed words for all the consonant runes are made simply by adding the 5 vowel sounds to the corresponding consonant. So for F, Fa, Fe, Fi, Fo, Fu, Af, F, If, Of, Uf. For R, Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru, R, Er, Ir, Or, Ur. For Ka, or the K, Ka, Ke, Ki, Ko, Ku, Ak, Ek, Ik, Ok, Uk, or it could be also a G sound, a G sound, so Ga, Ge, Gi, Go, Gu, Ag, Eg, Ig, Og, Ug. For thorn, could be a TH, a th sound, Tha, The, Thi, Tho, Thu, Ath, Eth, Eth, Oth, Uth. or it could be a D sound, da de di do do, ad ed id od ud, etc., right? For all these runes. Hopefully that makes sense. This is an original chart from his book. It's old font. If we take the seed words that start with the corresponding consonant sounds, then we have a very basic alliterative song, fa fe fi fo fu, for the fa rune. So then when Kummer publishes his Holy Runic Power or Holy Runic Might book in 1932, he gives these same songs for his corresponding rune practice. So for the first rune, this is the graphic from his book, one takes up the posture and one says, softly sing or hum the F, or fa, and then I recommend the following sound formula. Fa, fe, fi, fo, fu. So if you just know the consonant that the rune corresponds to, then all you got to do is add the vowels, the 5 vowels to it, and that will give you a formula. This is a basic formula. The second formula is that you once you learn the names of the runes, then sometimes you can mantralize the name of the rune, or just the vowel sound that corresponds to it. So in this case, U or Ur rune, the second rune, could also be Os, the name of the rune, in this case for the Os rune, the fourth rune. But you could even do, and this is another thing from his book, A, Ae, Ai, Ao, Au, if you wanted to do that. And you could even, change it up and make it A, E, A, I, A, O, A, U, A. So now we're going to put all these pieces together. Below we have a table, and again, this is in the handout that you can download at the bottom, showing the runic posture and the corresponding song as the associated traditional Germanic mantram, which have been taken from those given by Kummer and other authors if they were available. And below that, we have the Gnostic or Rosicrucian association. Sometimes it'll say same. So fa fe fi fo fu, plus there's a prayer. In this one, for the Ur rune, there's a prayer, and then you use Aum or Ram Io. For this one, ta te ti to tu, etc. There's different ones. And then sometimes what you'll find is that it repeats the name of the rune. So we're going to go through each one of these runes individually, look at the postures given by the Germanic folk before Huiracocha brought them over and sort of formulated it in his way, brought them over into the Americas, and then we'll look at the Gnostic and Rosicrucian forms. But before we touch on that, we just want to go over this term Aryan, right? Because people think that it means a certain group, but let's remember that Blavatsky used this term differently. And that this term, we talked about how this term was changed from referring to one thing into referring to another. Völkisch authors made it, and this is in the historical context, you can go back and review that material if you want, but the Völkisch authors started saying, it means basically European people, whereas that's not what it meant before. And for Blavatsky, it was anyone or just about anyone that's on the planet now. She says from dark brown to creamy white, cream milky white or something like that. And in the Gnostic movement, it refers to something similar to Blavatsky, that is the 5th root race. All those peoples on our planet at the present time. So when the Germanic authors use the term Aryan, if we interpret it in the Gnostic sense to say it means everyone, all people, then we can take something out of it and get a different perspective. We want to remember the context that they had and understand that historical context. But we also want to extract out what's useful to us from that, which is, what if it was more of a universal thing and not a we're better than somebody else thing, which is, as we mentioned, a common theme that you'll find throughout history and throughout different nations and cultures, people thinking that they're better than others. Often we think of Völkisch, the Völkisch movement, as referring to only those people of European ancestry, but the idea of a special group or folk is often used as a catalyst to unite a people regardless of their ancestry. Could be a country, right? Could be, it's not just a physical appearance, but it's your location. We not only see it in the so-called racial power movements, but also in religious extremism. People that say, well, our religion is the best and your religion is bad or wrong. Nationalism, and even in modern-day gang culture. Many times people want to define themselves by what group or groups they belong to, or by which ones they don't belong to. But in terms of Gnostic psychology, this doesn't really allow us to know ourselves. To know ourselves, to know what we are internally, depends firstly on our ability to direct our attention to our interior. Secondly, it depends on what we do with the data we receive from our observations. If we define ourselves based on external things, race, ethnicity, nation, politics, socioeconomic situation, local affiliation, etc., then we're more trying to fit a predefined mold of what that exterior thing should or shouldn't be, rather than trying to study ourselves. Because all these things they've already defined for us, right? Oh, you're poor, so you're this. You're this political party, so you're that. You're from this country, so this is what we do. So that doesn't mean we're observing ourselves. That doesn't mean we're studying ourselves. If our goal is to know ourselves, right, self-knowledge, then let us recognize the drawbacks of group affiliation. And instead, let us attentively study ourselves. In any case, in our studies of the runes, we must note the influences that have affected modern runology, so that we can understand what needs to be discarded and what needs to be emphasized. Modern runology emerged from a Völkisch culture. We've hopefully shown that. And we can study this while at the same time extracting the essential concepts from it in order to salvage some wisdom from these authors. Because we'll tell you right now that we had to edit some of these authors, because if we left it as is, it would sound racist if somebody was searching something on the internet and just randomly came onto it and they didn't listen to the other lectures that we'd done prior to this. So we understand what they're talking about, which is they're trying to have an ideal culture. So we modify the language a little bit to include that ideal culture so we can see the beauty in it and get rid of the superficiality. So let's not forget that after World War II, the United States took many German scientists who'd been working on the missile and rocket technology and put them to work. They put them into the program that allowed the United States to go to the moon, which was called Operation Paperclip. Meaning that we should learn how to extract what's useful and not just throw away things because the direction that was headed in maybe wasn't good for us, but we can redirect it and use the same mechanism, the same power or force in a different direction. So let's take advantage of this esoteric information, but without becoming fanatical, because there are definitely some themes that can help us advance quickly in these studies. Final thing we want to talk about on this page before we jump into Huiracocha's introduction is an extract from 1954. Samael and Veyor published a book, Igneous Rose, where he talks about Huiracocha and his course on magic runes. He says, in his course of runic magic, the master Huiracocha teaches all these things. He was referring to certain runic exercises that he gave in that book. However, the sacred runes are not the property of Master Huiracocha, because this knowledge is as ancient as the world and belongs to the great schools of internal mysteries. That's why we're studying this. We do not accept the statement of the Master Huiracocha, which states that black and yellow-skinned people cannot belong to the White Lodge because it is only for people who belong to the white race. Right? So he's saying that's not true. We cannot accept this type of racial prejudice because the White Lodge is universal. Masters from all races exist within our venerable White Lodge. We must not forget that the masters Moria and Kut Humi belong to the yellow race. The white race is not superior nor inferior than any other race. Simply, it is different, and that is all. Right? Each race is different. We disagree with Master Huiracocha's despise for Oriental wisdom. Christ taught 3 ways in order to reach the union with the intimate, the intimus or inner being. Number 1, when he was preaching to the multitudes, he was mystically exalted. He showed us the way of Ramakrishna, Kempis, and Francis of Assisi. This is the path of Anthony of Padua and Teresa of Jesus, the mystical path. Number 2, when Christ was walking with Magdalene, the repentant prostitute, when he was among publicans and sinners, fishermen, and wine drinkers, he showed us the Gnostic path. And number 3, when he retired to the solitude of the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, he then taught the way of Oriental Yoga. The 7 rays of cosmic evolution are synthesized in these 3 ways that the Nazarene showed. Therefore, we cannot despise Oriental wisdom. All human intimates or inner beings who are fastened to the wheel of births and deaths belong to these 3 ways. With all this, we sustain that sexual magic, white tantra, between husband and wife, is the way in order to reach nirvana. Therefore, we cannot accept the racial prejudice of Master Huiracocha for any reason. God has no preference for anyone. All human beings, without distinction of race, sex, creed, or color, are beloved children of the Father, and we have the same rights. We also cannot accept the absurd thesis of Huiracocha, who stated that it is a sin for a man of one race to become married with a woman of another race, and that the bastard children of such marriages are children of the devil. We recognize that the Master Huiracocha is a guru of the Universal White Fraternity, and it is evident for me that he is an archbishop of the Gnostic Church. Yet, he committed a lamentable mistake when he made these statements in his course of runic magic. There is no doubt that if the Guru Huiracocha had a physical body, he would rectify these errors, because humans commit errors. However, only those who are stubborn remain in error. All human beings, white, black, yellow, red, and brown, have the right to speak the verb of light and to form part of the great universal white fraternity, because everyone is a beloved child of the Father. God has no preference for anyone. He cares equally for humans and ants and birds and reptiles. God has no racial prejudice and loves all his children with infinite love, without distinction of sex, race, creed, or color. We must love all human beings. We must give even the last drop of our blood for all our brothers and sisters who belong to this great human family. And then the last paragraph, he says, evil ones criticize me because I teach the secret doctrine of the Gnostics to humanity. I diffuse all the esoteric teachings in order to save my brothers and sisters of this humanity. Everything that I know is for my brothers and sisters. Therefore, I have decided to teach them the most sacred things of the universe, so that they may enter Eden as I have entered. So again, you can download these documents if you're interested, which are also cited if you wanted to look at the original sources. But with that, we're going to jump into Huiracocha's introduction to the runes. In 1936, doing some research on the internet, we found a Chilean magazine, Astrological Almanac for 1936, Practical Guide to Astrology, the Sciences, Hermeticism, Literature, and Agriculture. What interested us was these certain articles. These articles are translated in a document called the Gnostic Rosicrucian Runology, which is a bilingual document. These very interesting articles we're going to read as our warm-up. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment area. Somebody put afraid to comment. Don't be afraid. Go ahead. The runes. This is the article from 1936. In all the continents, be it in Europe, Asia, Africa, and above all in America, we find inscriptions carved upon rocks, which we know by the name of rock inscriptions, with primitive instruments. Men who lived thousands of years ago engraved certain signs on cliffs, for which for them represented something sacred, and they wanted to preserve them. In Spanish, we have a curious word, calar, which we use commonly in order to express the act of marking products, for example, to mark fabrics or metals. We also call the action of cutting into a watermelon or another melon in order to verify maturity, calar. And we say the same word, calar, when we put the bayonets into position with the intention to injure the enemy. In short, to penetrate the motive, the reason, or the secret of a thing, we call calar. Among the ancient peoples of the north, calar or cabalar was said for the act of tracing or carving inscriptions on stones. Today, translating this term, we find the root of the word Kabbalah or Kabbalah, which means tradition. Thus, we see that the Kabbalah is not Hebraic, but Nordic. The two main runic systems received from the Germans and the Scandinavians were called Futhark. In them, each runic letter represented a god, and although much of our mythological knowledge has been lost, some was preserved, like the god Tyr, Tins, etc. Tacitus has already acknowledged that these runic characters had a certain magical disposition. Okay, so this guy was a Latin historian, and when he was working with the Roman army, and they went into Europe to try and expand the Roman Empire, there was so-called barbarians up there, and he just documented their culture. So sometimes it's interesting to read that, and some people read it and draw certain conclusions from that. So Tacitus has already acknowledged that these runic characters had a certain magical disposition, and we can assert the same, that the knowledge of the runes was a privilege of the initiate priests, above all in that which refers to runic magic as prophecy. The degeneration of our civilizations has led to the anthropomorphic ideas of divinities, which does not invalidate that ancient peoples recognized that behind these names of gods were hidden cosmic magical forces, and that since human language was the exponent of the Logos, of the mediator of God, thus the characters written or engraved upon these rocks were magical manifestations of the Logos itself. If a man can act upon the cosmic forces through the tone or word, mantrams, then he can also injure or exercise through the runes. Just as the language of light preceded ordinary language, the origin of the runes is divine. This is an engraving where you can see runic signs preserved up until now in many coats of arms. This is the original image from the document. Dusty books from the libraries of Sweden, Norway, and other Nordic countries allowed us to access, in part, the key to this high magic, until in the archives of the Rose-Cross Fraternity, manuscripts were found which confirmed and complemented the truths conveyed by those works. In this way, it was possible to translate and interpret works of magic superior to everything known from the East, confirming the old Latin sentence, "The light comes from the north, ex septentrione," I'm pronouncing that wrong, ex septentrione lux. By theoretically discovering the power of the runes as magical agents, we lacked the connection with ourselves as an organism. But the Dr. Caligari of Rome discovered that man is a kind of radio antenna, whose centers of reception and emission are located on the skin. He experimented with receiving and sending messages more than 100 kilometers away. With this, he saw that to mentally form pictures of objects, geometric figures, and letters of the alphabet regularly presented difficulties. He tried several processes such as Morse code and telegraphy, but with no better results. Dr. Caligari did everything in his power, but he obtained nothing. A celebrated runist who took over the same system of the Italian doctor and, since he knew the matter, found the key by making use of the runes. The runes in themselves have enlivening forces, and even if these forces are only accessible in a rudimentary manner through the Rose-Cross runic practices or exercises, one still becomes capable of handling high magic in a way that even Alphonse Lévy could not do himself. The Rose-Cross has discovered, in the runes, the key to the highest powers. Dr. Krumheller, Berlin, September 1935. Multiple articles in his magazine here. The next article is called The Magic Power of the Runes. Otto Hauser, in his work Germanic Creed, and in his translation of the Edda, shows that many cosmic events which were related to the annual course of the sun were personified in figures of German legends. Many cosmic events were personified in the figures of German legends. All the original worship of the Nordic people was a veneration to the Holy Sun, like a great celestial power that always woke up again in the land of its death, the winter sleep. The Nordic man loved the sun as an eternal vital force and as the image of all light, both physical and spiritual. The runes originally came from this source and were always considered as cosmic signs. They served for the denomination of the ortho, or rising, and setting of the sun in its annual course. And for this reason, they were also used as signs in calendars. These calendars of runic rods or staffs were used in Sweden until 300 years ago. We can still see them today in the Nordic Museum of Stockholm. Many explorers believe that the runes are the oldest writing in the world, and it is proven that the runes were not only signs indicative of the course of the sun, and simple signs according to our current sense, but even more, they were also magic signs. Let's occupy ourselves with them. Futhark, which is the name of the runic alphabet. This word is composed of the first letters that consist of 24 signs, which are conserved in 5 monuments. In the Edda, there appears a Futhark of 18 signs, which we will observe more closely. Each rune has, like each letter of our alphabet, a name, which represents both a root word and a numeric value, as they are found in the Song of the Havamal. That's the same thing he's talking about that Guido von List mentioned. The simplest and most popular use of the runes was for predictions. To this object, the runes were engraved on branches or rods of beech and then cut out. These beech rods, note that letters in German are called Buchstaben, Büsche or beech, plus stab or rod, staff. So it's like a beech staff is the name of a letter. So there's clearly a connection there. So these beech rods were thrown at random onto a white cloth and then picked up with their heads up, meaning they weren't looking at what they were picking up, and handed over to a man or woman knowledgeable for its interpretation. Said oracle was received as coming from superior forces. Even now, the custom is still preserved in some places. Tristan Kurzon, so you see him mentioning now one of the authors that we're going to study in his article. Tristan Kurzon revealed the procedure to us some years ago. The runic consultation should be carried out in a beech or oak forest and only at certain times, at sunrise or at 6 or 9 in the morning, at midday or even at 3 or 6 in the evening, as well as at the setting of the sun, preferring Wednesdays or Sundays. The consultation should be completely alone and in one's best suit. Another important detail was not to talk to anyone about it. Silently cut the runes of beech, oak, or hazel rods or sticks, tying them up slowly with fibers. There were 4 different methods known: Druid, Dordon, Stonehenge, and that of Halgadom. It was up to the consultant to choose the one that seemed the most appropriate. In the aforementioned Song of Havamal or Edda, the runes are presented for us as ancient magical signs. In this song, Odin or Wotan describes how he invented the runes and the magical significance that they enclose. Even today, the use of the runes in villages, which is demonstrated. Even today, the use of the runes lives on in villages, which is demonstrated by Siegfried Kummer, right? Another author that we're going to study, mentioning 2 of them in the same article, in his book, Holy Runic Power. The Tyr rune, he says, served as a magic formula against the Jetadura, the evil eye. The Tyr rune served as a magic formula against the evil eye. The runes were used in short inscriptions on weapons, jewels, and coins. Here is a spear. As well as in various shields that survive today. In the north, these inscriptions are customarily engraved on tombs. One of them is that of Uppland, which dates from over 1,000 years before Jesus Christ. To whosoever has good eyes in order to observe, is still saluted today by benevolent signs in houses of old German cities and villages. Speaking of its former inhabitants who knew how to appreciate, through tradition, their primordial knowledge. It is possible that the current inhabitants may have no idea of the deep significance of the timber houses. In this regard, Kummer says, it was in the mountains between Saxony and Bohemia where I found an old house which invited me, through its ruins in the timber, to rest in it. I told the owner that I already saw from afar what his house told me. He answered me that he had never understood why his father gave so much value to these beams, for which he always said to him, in these beams our great-great-grandparents already believed, and they never went wrong. I showed the owner at the entrance of the house a beam with 3 tear runes, and then he remembered that his grandfather said, these magic signs reject all demons, witches, and pestilence in animals, adding that in reality never have his animals suffered pestilence, and he was convinced of the power of these signs, although the priest laughed at him. So you can kind of see him in some old Germanic style houses, how they work with those beams. The use of the runes in timber houses probably dates from the times of the persecution of the church. The persecuted, in order to recognize each other, opted for this method, and thus the tradition was perpetuated. It is clear that this quick story does not leave the runic mysteries exposed. Many of these signs are found in the Indo-American countries, and nonetheless, it has accommodated the Rose Cross fraternity of the Summum Supremum Sanctorium in Berlin to be the first to reveal them to the Latin world. All right, so we got one more article we're going to look at here. The language of light, harmony, vibration, and the law of rhythm. In our book, Logos Mantram Magic, we have proven that human language is of divine origin, and that all of its genesis proceeds from the light. That is to say, in its beginnings, it was a language of light. I am the light of the world, said the Nazarene, and St. John repeated that the Logos, the verb, the word, and the divine light were 2 aspects of the same thing, 2 exponents of the same thing, and consequently, were identical. If God, the divine force, the universal law, the great all, life in itself, the great energetic potentiality, is the same and equal in essence and in substance with the word of light, or the Logos, then we are being given a synthesis that encompasses everything. We could interpret Genesis as saying, in the beginning was the rhythm, and as the first manifested law, this had to be the law of vibratory movement, or that primordial genesisizing light, the vital electricity that generated light, heat, sound, etc. What is it that animates everything? The voice, the spirit, and the word, the great breath. The universe has to be a wonderful concert of vibratory movements. This great divine concert is musical. Through the law of harmony, although it may not be perceived physically, and music, the law of music, is only its manifestation or expression in the world of sound. Rhythm, just as in music, must be the condition that prevails for all this great accumulation of vibrations. Even the human organism obeys a rhythm, and the heart itself keeps a beat. So then, if you've never listened to this, the Rings of Nebulon, Rheingold, the beginning, the prelude, we're not going to play it because they usually flag the video as copywritten material, blah, blah, blah. but we recommend you listen to it. That's why we've linked it here. Do you remember the chromatic prelude to Wagner's Rheingold, from which the symbolic waters of the river are fecundated? This must have been the biblical genesisizing principle. These stories, just as that of Pan's flute, the magic flute of Papageno, the lyre of Apollo, are not fiction. They are an eternal truth. Music is number and sound. Vibration had to construct everything that exists with its word, verb, or logos. What did Pythagoras mean when he said that he heard the rhythmic music of the stars in movement? That vibratory electrical energy is what beats throughout the solar universe, dragging planets towards a central sun. As such, they are chained electron to electron, atom to atom, molecule to molecule, cell to cell, etc. in each of the combinations and forms of this vast system. This system works under the law of rhythm. Harmony and music are produced when the vibratory values of the notes and the scale are encountered in relation to others. Let me read it to you again. Harmony and music are produced when the vibratory values of the notes of the scale are encountered in relation to others. Every musician knows that the chords formed by a note and with its third or fifth octave are harmonic. Contrarily, they are discordant. There is only one reality in the universe, energy. Matter is nothing but the geometric or geocentric place of the singular points of an energy field. We receive the materia prima, the primordial matter of the cosmos, from the planets and the stars, and each one vibrates in a sound which is particular to it. These astrological influences, like everything that gives us impressions from the exterior world, pass through certain magnetic centers within us that in their turn are subject to our endocrine glands, organs, etc. Here's a table. He gave these ones, which for the most part are very similar to the ones Samael Veor gave. Each center has a star or planet that produces its basic substance and a sound that corresponds to it. The occult powers also reside in these centers, and whosoever wakes up those powers will show that within mantrams is enclosed the special force of the vowels that can give us help. So now you see him emphasizing vowels. Vowels and consonants are syntheses, and their forces activate the astrological bodies as well as act upon the chakras. He talks about the sounds being associated with different planets here, and there's a little table. Gives the association of planets and constellations. It's interesting. But we haven't been able to verify that it's accurate. And then the last thing we want to look at is Huiracocha's psychotechnical practices. This is a term he used. We have intuition as a prominent divine factor, which can guide us. But intuition does not work for us if we do not do magical exercises. We should study the movements before we do these magical exercises, and this has always been the privilege of initiatic societies. These exercises and everything that is done, like the steps and the movements of different Masonic degrees, are not only psychotechnical practices, but they are also practices that can take us to a superior state of consciousness from the commonly known state of consciousness. There is a new science, eurythmia, or it would be better to say Eurythmosophia. With this science, we learn to do our gymnastic movements imitating the consonants and pronouncing vowels. Through this system, Huiracocha was able to return lunatics back into rational people, including those who had spent many years in a mental hospital. This, he says, was because they had lost the rhythm. And when they were rhythmically put back into alignment, then they were instantly healed. What an interesting idea. The secret of vocalization is to produce edifying, constructive, and creative sounds. In Huiracocha's science of Eurythmosophia, we use the runes, of which he says the following. The alphabet is made up of vowels and consonants. Those signs, whose signs all have a direct relationship with our organism, and for each one there is a corresponding initiatory movement. The primitive letters were the runes, and in Nordic initiatic schools the students learned those gymnastics or runic movements that we're going to teach. So, and all this stuff is also in the handout at the bottom of the page. He's just got some associations, colors, astrological associations. So that's the end of the material that we wanted to present to you today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. Otherwise, you can always send them to us at gnosticstudies@gmail.com. So in the next class, we're going to be looking at the Fa rune. We're finally there. Have some thank yous. You're welcome. You know what? I think we're not going to have any questions. At least it doesn't look like there's any popping up. So we just want to say thank you guys for your attention. I know sometimes these classes last a long time, but you know, you can always pause it and come back later. But we're just trying to get all that information in. But we really do appreciate your attention, sharing your attention with us, and hopefully you found something useful in this material. We assure you that it has been useful to us, and that's why we want to share it with you. So since there aren't any questions or comments at this time, we're going to end the stream. And yeah, so we look forward to the next one with you. And you can always email us, gnosticstudies@gmail.com. And in the meantime, we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work.